All right, it's been a bit since I've had a chance to talk to this guy, brilliant guitar player, and I think I last saw him play at NAMM a couple years ago and just killed as usual. And he is best known, of course, for his work with RACER X, his incredible solo career, and, of course, Mr. Big. I'm talking about guitarist Paul Gilbert. Good to see you, Paul. How are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Eddie. Good to see you and hear you as well.
Yeah, I remember when every time I see you, I think of when we had you on my old TV show, That Metal Show, and we had you up there playing in the stands, and you killed in it, but you also did this bit, which I don't know if you remember, where you made the best faces while you were playing. And I said, Paul, come on, give us some more of those faces. You were throwing shapes up there, and you nailed it. It was awesome.
Well, I can only play with faces. That just means I'm telling the truth. You know, if I don't make a face when I'm playing, then that's just lies.
I see you got we're doing this on Zoom, and I see a bunch of your guitars behind you and everything. Is that a home studio that you have there?
Yeah, I inhabit the bottom floor, and it's all. I've got a video studio, a recording studio. I got a little drum kit set up. And it keeps me happy to be surrounded by instruments.
Are you one of those guys, I imagine you are, that you are constantly noodling on a guitar? Or is it like you're annoying the people that you live with, your wife or whatever, that you're always kind of, even when you're watching TV, you kind of have to have it in your lap?
Well, we've worked out, you know, how to balance the life a bit. So when I go upstairs, I tend to leave the guitar down here. But that's how I learned to play when I was a kid, was by filling every spare little gap of time. You know, instead of looking at the phone, you know, I'd pick up the guitar.
No doubt, no doubt. Well, it's worked well for you. Bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about, but let's get right into this record, which is coming out on Friday initially, and that is simply called the Dio album, which I've been talking about quite a bit on the show, because when I saw you were doing it, being so close to Ronnie, I thought it was an amazing thing to do. The song choices you made are incredible, and attacking it from an instrumental perspective and playing, Ronnie known for that incredible voice, but then you taking it and doing that on guitar was just such a cool approach. I didn't even know you were such a big Dio guy. So before we talk about the record specifically, what about when did Ronnie first come on your radar as a kid? What was your first record, your first introduction?
Well, I remember Neon Nights came on the radio from the Heaven and Hell record, and I didn't know who it was. I didn't even know it was Sabbath, because, you know, I was familiar with Ozzy's voice being Black Sabbath, and it obviously wasn't Ozzy, but I loved it. It was, you know, that song just grabbed me. So I tracked down the record. I was about 12, so, you know, I couldn't play or sing any of it. Still can't sing any of it, which I played on guitar. But yeah, I got that album, and I ended up learning a lot of those songs. Played in my cover bands when I was a kid, and then that was the cool thing about being in a cover band is the other people in the band. You'd go over to their house and they'd have the albums that you didn't have. So like that turned me on to the Rainbow catalogs. I had played with the B3 player, and he had Rainbow on stage, and we used to open up the set with Kill the King, the live version. And then I got Rainbow Rising, and of course that solo Dio stuff came out. Then I was ready for that. I was prepared.
So it sounds like around the same time for me, because my introduction to Ronnie was hearing Heaven and Hell, and that was my first Sabbath record, and I was just like floored by that record, still am. And then I went back and got into the Rainbow stuff and discovered what that was all about. And then, of course, Dio came along, and I was pretty much in on ground one, on level one with Holy Diver when that initially came out. But when was the first time you saw Ronnie live, Paul? What band was it in?
I snuck into a pre-tour rehearsal. I knew somebody who knew somebody, and I was like hiding in the shadows, hoping not to get kicked out. I was pretty sure I wasn't supposed to be there, and it was the Big Dragon on Stage tour, and Vivian Campbell was still in the band, I'm pretty sure. And they were doing like Hungry for Heaven and Rock and Roll Children. It was that era, and that was amazing, because it was, there were 3 people in the audience, in this giant warehouse, and somehow I managed to get in there. So that was the first time I saw him.
When you look at the catalog that you have to pick from when you're going to do a record like this related to Dio, you got the Rainbow stuff, you got the Sabbath stuff, and you have the Dio stuff, all of which is represented on this record. But being a fan and wanting to approach this and do this, it had to be incredibly difficult to narrow it down to the it's looking like 12 tracks you decided to do on here. So how did that process work for you?
Well, after realizing that I wanted to have it in thirds, third Sabbath, third Rainbow, third Dio, then I had absolutely that problem. I had too many songs that I liked and wanted to cover. And I ended up realizing that some of the songs, even though I love them, like, for example, Stargazer, Light in the Black, Gates of Babylon, Sign of the Southern Cross, and I loved all those, and I was excited about trying them. But all those songs have long instrumental parts in the middle. They're like long guitar solos or keyboard solos. And I wanted to keep it really focused on Ronnie singing. So, rather than do Stargazer, I thought I'm going to do Man on the Silver Mountain, because that's more of a vocal song. It's got a shorter guitar solo, and it allows me to really focus on what Ronnie did as a vocalist. And even though I'm playing on guitar, that's, that was my concept for the record, is like to stick, focus on Ronnie.
Yeah. And you did. That's a really interesting point, because Ronnie's voice is, of course, so iconic. And talk about taking that approach to listening to that vocal melody and then applying it to playing it instrumentally. Like, I'm not a guitar player, but obviously you're just following the melody of his vocal and recreating it as best you can on lead guitar, right?
Exactly. Well, I want to improve my ability to play a melody and have it not die. I want to be able to breathe life into it. And as a kid, I didn't believe that was possible, because I grew up when Muzak was still a thing. You'd walk into an elevator and there would be the genuine elevator music, destroying the pop hits of the day with this soulless instrumental. And so that convinced me that, like, the instant you play a vocal line on something that's not a vocal, you're just going to kill it. It's going to be horrible. Now, the thing that started to turn me around was I got on the G3 tour with Joe Satriani in 2007, and Joe was doing it right. He was basically standing in the vocalist's shoes, and I watched him. I watched the audience dig it. I was digging, and I thought maybe actually this could be possible. And of course, Joe's not the first. Jeff Beck did that kind of thing. Peter Frampton won a Grammy doing a record of vocal lines on guitar. But that was something I've always shied away from and never been very good at. And so over the last, 5 or 10 years, I've been working on it, getting more and more confidence, getting more and more of a flow. And finally, I'd actually been teaching Dio stuff I have an online school where I teach guitar players, and I'd use the melody of Long Live Rock and Roll as a lesson to teach my students. I've probably taught it 20 times. And by the time you do that, I started getting more confidence. And finally, I thought, man, it'd be such a blast to do just a whole album of this stuff. And plus, as a singer, if I tried to sing it, I don't have that range. So to have that limitation taken away, and to be able to just use like the instincts that I have as a singer, but with an instrument that's where I can actually hit the high notes, and I'm not struggling to hit those. That's a real joy.
The rundown of tracks, so you can see what Paul did here. You've got Starstruck, Man on the Silver Mountain, Long Live Rock and Roll, and Kill the King. That's the representation for Rainbow. And then the representation for Dio is The Last in Line, Holy Diver, Stand Up and Shout, and Don't Talk to Strangers. And then the Sabbath stuff, you went with Neon Nights, Country Girl, which is a great, like a deeper track, but a great one, Heaven and Hell, and am I missing one?
And Lady Evil.
And Lady Evil, also from Heaven and Hell. So, yeah, I mean, there's so much good stuff. Like you mentioned, you thought about Sign of the Southern Cross. Did you say that or no?
I did say that. Yeah, I love that song.
But that's like
that'll be on volume 2.
Right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I mean, there's so much deep catalog here. I know this one hasn't come out yet, but would you like to do another round?
Oh man, well, actually, one of the things that sparked this album was I made a list of singers that I wanted to learn from and copy and be inspired by copying them on guitar. And Ronnie was the first name that I wrote down. That was like number one. But after that, I wrote down 30 more names. So, obviously, I could do another, the Dio album volume 2, and I'd have a total blast doing it. But at the same time, I wouldn't be able to resist taking a look at my list and, Brad Delp, to just play like the first Boston album and do all the Brad Delp lines. And a lot of the stuff is like my desire to get in the shoes of the singers that can sing higher than I can. I can't hit those Brad Delp lines with my voice, but with guitar, it's possible. Or like TNT, Tony Harnell. Nobody could hit those notes. He's like he's so unbelievably high with his range, but on guitar, all those notes are there. And so, that's just such a, the liberating experience to be able to spend time as with the role of the singer and not be, just immediately fail because I can't hit the notes with my voice.
Who else did you have working with you on this record, Paul? Are there other musicians on it that we would know?
Oh, well, I played all the bass. I played all the guitar. I actually played all the keyboard parts on guitar as well, figured out ways to do that. And then the drummer was Bill Ray, who played on my Behold Electric Guitar record, and I've done a lot of touring with him recently. And that was it. That was enough instruments. I had a great engineer named Zach Bloomstein, and that was it for the three of us.
Was this a COVID record? This feels like something to me like you had some downtime, COVID, people locked down. We're seeing a lot of these records come out. Was this a product of you kind of being locked in a studio and needing something to do?
Well, I could have done. I mean, COVID was finished enough where I had options. Really, the Werewolves of Portland was my COVID record. But this one, I think I just wanted to do it because, in a way, I wanted to get the best guitar lesson from the best guitar teacher in the world, which is Ronnie James Dio. Like I knew that I would learn more from that and sort of expand, what I'm able to express on the instrument by doing that. So in a way, it was kind of selfish. I just wanted to learn and grow thanks to what Ronnie has to offer.
That's a really interesting thing, because when you think about this material as a guitarist and you say Sabbath, Rainbow, Dio, the immediate stuff that would come to mind for any guitar player is Blackmore, Iommi, Vivian Campbell. But for you, it was not so much that, it was the melody, creating the vocal melody and learning from Dio as a guitar player. That's fascinating to think about.
Well, playing those, the guitar riffs was truly a blast. I mean, that's what I grew up. That was like, kind of my comfort zone, because as a teenager, I played, all songs from all three of those great players all the time as a teenager. And the thing, and I've got a question for you and maybe the world about this, is as I was playing those riffs, the hair stood up on my arms more than any record I've ever done in my life. Like it was getting to the point where I was really like going, here we go again. Just every time I'd play one of those riffs from Tony Iommi, Blackmore, and Vivian Campbell, I started wondering, like, well, what other animals, like a cat, if it's threatened, the hair stands up. Like, I don't think it's because I feel threatened, but it's something to do with like life or death. You're gonna have to like fight for your life, and there's something about that's just, I'm theorizing, but what's your theory? Like, I'm sure you've had that before. You hear some music that really moves you, the hair stands up on your arms.
Oh yeah.
Do you have an idea why that is?
I think definitely, hair stands up, goosebumps, kind of the same thing. I have that though with stuff, and my thing is, I don't know, I think it made such a deep connection to us as kids. And it's still there. Like, I think in some ways it takes us back to being those kids. Like, when I hear the song Heaven and Hell, which you have on your record, I mean, that takes me back to 1980, and I won that record on the boardwalk in the Jersey Shore, and I was in high school, and I heard that riff and I heard that voice and I heard that record and I looked at the cover with those three angels smoking, and it was like, I remember where I was when I heard it, how I got it. I don't remember anything, Paul, about anything, but I remember that. So I think it's just a recall thing. And if it's such special music to you, I'm a huge UFO fan as well.
Yeah, me too.
And there's Strangers in the Night is a record that does that for me every time I listen to it. And I was reading, if you have the reissue of Strangers in the Night, Steve Harris from Iron Maiden did the liner notes. And he's a massive UFO guy as well. And he talked about the song Love to Love on that record. And he said, every time I hear it, now for over 40 years, he goes, I get goosebumps. He goes, as a matter of fact, I'm writing about it and my hair's standing up. I'm talking to you about it right now for real, Paul. As I swear to God, as I'm talking to you, I'm getting jittery, So there's just these things that I think it's just a recall to, if the music moved you that much initially, it still brings you back to that moment. That's what it is for me, at least.
That's cool. That's just time travel.
Yeah. I think that's as much time travel because I can't remember like I couldn't remember who my guest was on the show yesterday when I came on the air today, but I could tell you exactly where I was 43 years ago when I got Heaven and Hell and took the cellophane off the record.
Yeah, I remember none of the records themselves, but being in cover bands as a kid, I remember playing, Heaven and Hell with when I was 15 years old, wearing a Halloween costume that I borrowed from my mom because it fit me. I was a leopard and with a tail, and then watching the girls from my high school walk in and realizing like nobody else dressed up in a Halloween costume, I'm the only one, and they're gonna just think I'm a biggest nerd in the world. But I was playing Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, so maybe I got a chance.
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting Women and Children First by Van Halen, same year, 1980. And I remember that I went to the dentist and my mom, I had a cavity drilled and I was just bummed out and in pain. And my mom's like, well, I'll bring you to the record store and you can pick a record out and you'll feel better. And she did. And I got Women and Children First. Now, that is 43 years ago. And I am in that car when I'm telling you that story. I can't tell you another thing about that period of time, but I can tell you that. So you're right. It's kind of as close to time travel as we get listening to these great records that we loved.
That's a glorious thing.
Yeah, it really is. Do you think there's an opportunity or a way that you can perform this live? Would you like to do that? Or maybe if you do your own show, incorporate some songs into it? Is that what you'd like to do?
Well, when I get out there and do another solo tour, I'm definitely going to take a serious look at it. It's challenging because it probably needs more people than I usually have in my band, because usually I'm sort of juggling, just a one guitar band. I'll play the melody and then I'll hop over to the rhythm and put that in the spaces. But for the Dio stuff, it's really nice to have that wall of rhythm guitar. So I'd probably have to enlist a rhythm guitar player. And the problem with that is I'd be looking over at the rhythm guitar player and I'd be jealous, wishing I would play those parts because they're so much fun. So, that's sort of what I have to deal with. But when the time comes, I'll figure out a solution.
All right, one more question about this record. And again, it's called the Dio album from Paul Gilbert. It's out this Friday. So we talked about the guitar players that you're featuring here. Iommi, Blackmore, Vivian Campbell, all three phenomenal talents. Give me something on each of them from your perspective as a guitar player in terms of what you like and respect about what they did so much and where they kind of land for you as a great guitar player yourself.
Well, Tony Iommi is really in my physical DNA as a player, because early on, I was about 11 or 12 years old. I had a guitar teacher. He lent me the album "We Sold Our Souls for Rock and Roll." Yeah. And some of it I could actually get under my fingers. I could play a power chord. I could figure out some of the riffs. I could play, the riff of Sweet Leaf, riff of Iron Man. And I could just barely play that little looping lick at the end of Sweet Leaf. And that was like my one lick I could do. And when you have one lick you can do, that's all you do. So for like 2 years, I just played that lick and really honed it to perfection. And then of course you have to play a song that's not Sweet Leaf, and then but you've got your Sweet Leaf lick, and that's all you have. So I would try to put it in another song, and maybe it would be like, well, that's the wrong key. Okay, got to change the key. Well, it's not really the right the ratio of notes, so I got to stretch it out. Okay, well, the rhythm, that's not the same groove, so I got to change the groove a little bit, and because of that, it would sort of evolve into my own thing. And I kind of, it that was like the seed of so much of my, like, what appears to be a more sophisticated stuff now. If I play some complicated thing, it's still got Sweet Leaf at its core. And so I always feel like Tony Iommi is like at the center of at the core of my playing. Now, at the same time, I had the Machine Head record. I bought that at a flea market for like 50 cents when I was really young, like 7 years old. And there's no way I could play that stuff. It was so far beyond. I mean, actually, at that point, I hadn't even started playing yet. But when I did start playing, I still, because Blackmore was doing like fairly advanced blues stuff. Like Lazy is like, pretty sophisticated blues. And I wasn't anywhere near that. It was just really out of reach. So it wasn't until I got to be about 17 when I started to be able to tear apart some of those things. And that was when I did. It was really eye-opening and wonderful, and taught me so much getting into that. It really actually opened up my blues playing to learn Richie stuff, and to some extent the classical stuff too. Because I remember, like I said, I was playing with a keyboard player, and we did Kill the King, and that had like a lot of arpeggio stuff in it I had to figure out. And then Vivian Campbell, when that came out, this is like, a little more pure metal, although I could hear this Gary Moore influence in some of the licks he was doing. And the lick that both Vivian does and Gary Moore does, I can't do that lick. It's like, just, I've tried. I can do a bad version, but I don't want to do a bad version, so I just don't do it. And so I had to work out like a stretchy version that I can do with confidence. It sounds 95% the same notes, but it just the feel's a little different. And so when you get to that point where because every guitar player's got their own kind of fast thing, and it's kind of impossible to, maybe some overlap, but it's kind of impossible to really duplicate it. But you can sort of gaze at it from a distance and use it as inspiration. And then the riffs are great. I love all the early Dio riffs and learned all those. So all three huge heroes of mine.
Yeah, I just saw Vivian. Of these three guys, Vivian is the only one still playing this stuff, because Blackmore went off into Renaissance music and doesn't really do any of this anymore. And Tony is pretty much retired, and with Ronnie being gone, doesn't play this stuff. But Vivian, I just saw, I'm in Vegas at the moment, and I just saw hosted a show on Saturday that he played with the band Last in Line, which is him and Vinny Appice, half of the original Dio band. And seeing those guys dig into these Dio songs from these first two records live is phenomenal. And the whole time, if you ever see them do it, Vivian is just smiling ear to ear. And of course, he's got a huge gig in Def Leppard now, but I say to him all the time, I'm like, man, you go from literally playing stadiums with Def Leppard and being on private planes to being in a van and playing a club to 150, 200 people. Like, why do you do that? And he goes, just look at the smile on my face. He goes, it's so much fun reconnecting with my youth. And he said it actually took him a long time to remember what he did and become that guitar player again, because he had moved so far away from it. He said Def Leppard is really more for him a vocal gig, because it's a lot of singing. With this, he doesn't sing at all, and he can just lay back and dig into, really playing that stuff again. And he's playing it, Paul, now on the exact guitar. He still has the exact guitar he recorded the first two records. I think he said it was a 77 Les Paul. He still has it. He plays the whole live set with what he made the records on. Pretty cool.
That is killer. I love Vinny Appice too, man. One of my favorite drummers. I gotta check them out if I'm happen to be in the same town.
Oh, you have to. Yeah, you would love it. It's really, really good. All right, well, this is killer. Everybody check this out. The Dio album by Paul Gilbert. Again, it's out on Friday. We've been giving you some tastes of it going into the breaks. You can hear what we're talking about. Let me hit you with a couple other things, and I'll let you go. Obviously, big news a couple weeks ago when it was announced that Mr. Big is going to get active again. How do you feel about that?
Oh, man, I'm excited. You know what? Well, a couple things I'm excited about. One, we're going to do the Lean Into It record in its entirety, which we've never done. And it's about time. And, that's our classic record. So it's just going to be fun to play that and hear it. The other thing is, I think Nick DiVirgilio on drums is really the perfect choice. Not only as a drummer, but also as a singer, because Pat Torpey was such a big part of our harmony vocal sound, and Nick is like, lead vocalist, quality singer, so he's going to be great. And the other thing is like, I haven't really thought about doing the unaccompanied 80s style guitar solo in quite a long time. I think, Billy Sheehan, he keeps that up. That's one of his things he likes to do. But, I think because I teach a lot, I'm always like trying to focus on, sort of color within the lines, play in time, play with the song, focus, play melodies. And so I might just take all those barriers away and go like, just do the 80s guitar solo freak out, like I've never done before. And that's kind of the challenge I'm going to give myself, because I know Billy's going to do one, so I got to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with Billy recently because I was just at his 70th birthday in New Orleans. We had a surprise party for him, and I was on the road with the Winery Dogs, who I'm close with all those guys. And of those guys, all three of them, which of course are amazing musicians, Billy's the only one who's taking a solo out there by himself. So he's still owning that spot, and it's great.
That's his moment, and last
people want to see it. People want to see it because he's Billy, you're never going to hear bass playing like that before. So people it's the only time that he's out there, that there's only one guy on the stage and the spotlight's on him and he's just Billy owning it. And you should do that, man. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. Well, I've always done one, but in the last, tours like since 2009 when we did our reunion, I've always done where I try to focus more on like keeping it in a groove, and I thought this time I'm just going to do the heavy metal freak out. I'm going to just shoot arrows in the sky.
So you mentioned Lean Into It, which you're going to do start to finish, and then obviously fill out the rest of the set with stuff from the other records. How far into planning on this are you guys? I know the initial shows fittingly are in Japan and that area because, as everybody knows, Mr. Big's huge there. But where are you guys at as far as a timetable to rehearse and everybody get in the same room together and figure this all out, or have you done that already?
Yeah, well, flights are booked, rehearsal studios reserved, and so I'm just learning the tunes and putting my pedal board together and figuring out. The funny thing is, I remember the last time we did a Mr. Big tour, I was standing on stage, and I got the distinct impression that people in the audience were actually noticing what I was wearing. And that's really unusual feeling, because usually everybody, one of my shows, everybody's staring at the fingers and they don't care what kind of shirt I have. Right. But I thought, man, Mr. Big, it actually matters what I what I put on. I got to think about that. That's usually I don't care, but I thought I got to get a shirt that matters.
I saw you guys when you came back in, I think it was 2009 or something. I remember seeing you guys at the House of Blues. I think it was in Chicago. And my God, the band sounded great. And I think What If had just come out, which I love that record. And it was really cool. So I'm glad you're doing it. Now, just for clarity, Paul, is this kind of like a farewell run, or is this kind of testing the waters to continue going forward for Mr. Big?
I think we're committed to the farewell run, just sort of grouping up all our energy, doing it right one last time, and that feels good to me. Now, having said that, we have got our run in Asia and Japan. That happens in the summer, and we've got some time off, and we're going to restart it in 2024. So try to play everywhere else. So how long that goes remains to be seen.
But there's not been any talk about doing new music, right?
Well, that's the thing. We do have a stretch of time in between those two tours. So that, I think we're sort of thinking about it, going like, well, there is some time. Maybe we could do something. But that's still, we're sort of doing one job at a time. So it's like get the tour together and then take a look at that chunk of time and see if we might do something.
Do you have a favorite Mr. Big album? Is it Lean Into It?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely, gems on the other ones. And What If that you mentioned, actually, that one I thought turned out, it has a real good feel to me. But Lean Into It's just like, from start to finish, that one's really magic.
I love the first record. I remember getting the first. Take a Walk. That riff is just gigantic. I love that stuff. I hope you dig into some stuff from that first record too.
Oh, we always do. It's an interesting record. Like it, we were such a new band, and we immediately, it immediately came together and it immediately felt comfortable. But we still, had a ways to go. So I'm glad we were able to capture that time. It was a unique sound we had that as we kind of got closer and more glued together, then Lean Into It happened. But the first one is just really interesting one, and also live one that came from that tour, Raw Like Sushi, which that might just be an import. I don't know if that's available, but that was a cool little live record.
Did you know that Addicted to That Rush, which opens the first record, did you know that initially that it opened side 2 of the record? Did you know that?
I don't remember. My main memory of that was that we were surprised that our manager, we had a high-powered manager, Herbie Herbert, who had managed Journey, and he was kind of our hero because we knew that with him, anything could happen. But he stepped in and went like, "That's going to be the single," and that surprised us because we thought like, a single, it's got to be have some pop element, or be maybe the most melodic song in the record, the one that features Eric the most. And so to have the one that was like kind of the shreddiest, we're like, really, but he was like, yeah, you got to go with whatever's exciting, and that's the exciting one. So I was thrilled. I thought it was a great choice.
The reason why I ask you that question is because at that time when the first record came out, I was working for Megaforce Records from 86 to 90, 91. And our distributor was Atlantic. So we worked very closely with Atlantic, who, of course, put out those original Mr. Big records. And I used to work with the metal marketing people and all those people over there. And they had sent me, I probably still have it somewhere, an advanced cassette of the first Mr. Big record. And they're like, "Oh, Eddie, this is your kind of thing. You'll like this." And I remember getting it. And the record, I'm pretty sure, opened with Take a Walk. It was the first song on the first side of the cassette that I had. Yeah. And then the record came out. And I got it, and it opened with Addicted to That Rush, and it was flipped. And side 2, I think, became side 1 or something. And I was like, what happened here? And they said that when Herbie decided that the first single was going to be Addicted to That Rush, they thought that instead of that opening side 2, let's get it right up front and open the record with it. So whether you were on the cassette or the CD or whatever, it was the lead song, since they had changed and decided to make it the lead single. But somewhere out there are versions, because I may still have it, of the record with Addicted being the opening on side 2.
Wow. Well, I just missed the days when there were sides.
Right. You can still do it. I mean, you can still kind of envision in your mind. Well, then again, with the resurgence of vinyl, there are sides again. So you do have That's that true, if you want to do that. Are you doing the Dio record on vinyl?
It is on vinyl. Well, I had to shorten it to 10 songs so it would fit, because with vinyl there's length limitations. Right. Or maybe I should say the CD has a bonus too, where the glass is half full.
Right. Now I'm still a CD guy myself, but I know that vinyl is definitely a thing again. And I just saw where Metallica's putting out their new album on cassette. So all formats are back. It'll be 8-track before you know it, Paul. We'll have them all going again. Last thing, how's your hearing, man? I mean, we're talking right now. You seem to be doing okay, but I know you've had problems with your hearing, and I'm just wondering how that's holding up and how that's impacting you.
Well, you're a professional broadcaster. So, when I talk to you, everything's all right. When I go to the grocery store and they mumbled, "Do you want a receipt?" That's kind of rough. So as long as I surround myself with professional broadcasters, everything is good.
You're being nice. I'm just a loud person, so it's supposed to be around loud people.
As long as I surround myself with loudmouth people, everything's beautiful. The more loudmouths, the better.
I should hang around with you a lot more. Then you'll have no problem hearing me.
Right on.
But you wear the headphones still on stage as a byproduct of that to help you out, right?
I don't. I tried to do that, and what I've evolved to now is I just stuff the foam earplugs in as far as they'll go to try to preserve, try not to do any further damage. And here's the interesting thing. I'm going to tell you the positive thing that has come from hearing loss, which I never would have guessed. And that is I call it my inner melodic generator, the part inside of you that can hear music. And that has really improved. And the reason it's improved is because I can't rely on my ears as much as I used to. So I have to improve two things to compensate. One, I have my intention, my inner melodic generator has to kind of know in advance what I want to say musically. And that's a good thing to strengthen up. It's nice to know what you want to say. And then my knowledge of the instrument has to be better. So in other words, I almost have to play like real air guitar, where if I know what the phrase I want to play, the melody, I have to know what that looks like with my eyes closed and how that falls in the instrument without being able to, in a way, being able to see it with my eyes, just visualize it, and also without hearing it. And then if I add in the bit that I can hear, because my hearing's fine in the bass frequency, so I can hear something. It's just muffly. And if I combine that with knowing what I want to say and knowing what it looks like, I mean, I'm indestructible. And it's so much more satisfying to connect to that. Because what used to happen is I would just, I kind of knew the fingering patterns, and I'd be playing through it. I'd be listening and go, oh, stop there, because there's a good note. And I just sort of wait till I hear it. And that's a little bit more, you're kind of on the receiving end. Mm-hmm. It's almost like, if you have a CD and you don't know what it sounds like, you press play and then you listen to it. But I'm not on the receiving end anymore. I'm on the creating end. I know what it's supposed to sound like, I know what it's supposed to look like, I know what it's supposed to feel like. Then I get out there and do it. And so, on stage, I just need to hear like kick, snare, little bit of me. I'm good.
Was the damage done to your hearing? I'm assuming it's from the years of playing and stage volume. I mean, were you a guy that was super loud on stage back with RACER X, big wedges and all that?
I had a lot of fun. I've stuck my head in speaker cabins a lot once in a while you get the shrieking feedback, accident. And it turns out it may be genetic too, to some extent. It runs in my family a bit. But again, the way that I've had to adapt to it has thankfully allowed me to enjoy music at a deeper inner level more than I ever have. And I wouldn't have expected that. When I first found out that I had some hearing loss, I was really worried about it. I thought, man, this is my whole life. Am I going to have to give it up or what? And then as time went on and I developed my inner melodic generator, it's like, I'm playing better than I ever have. And I don't know if I would have had to develop that as much. So, I mean, it's kind of a strange metaphor, but like if I would say, if you have a person who's blind, they know where their furniture is better than a person who can see. Because they just have they've lived with they've developed like a spatial sense that, right. In the Game of Thrones, like there's the girl with the sword and she goes blind and she wins because of that reason. And I've got kind of the same thing with my hearing. Like I said, I'm not deaf. I can hear low frequencies, but what I've had to learn and develop in order to compensate has sort of given me superpowers, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, and last thing on this, and then I'll let you go. Have there been any advances for you that maybe can help you out? I talked to Brian Johnson recently on the show. He notoriously had a big problem with hearing, and he talked about it in his book. He's now met this guy who has helped him and come up with this device, and AC/DC's now actually going to do a show in October, his first time since going through all of that. His thing might be a little different than what you're dealing with, but every day, thankfully, we're hearing about medical advances and things like that. So have you had anybody talk to you that say maybe there's some stuff coming down the pike that could help you out?
Well, I mean, I've worn hearing aids for 10 years probably. And those, it's not like, it doesn't get you back to perfect, but it definitely is helpful. Right. There was a company that was developing like some sort of medical cure. It totally failed. It was, I even invested in the company and it did wildly well for about a year. And then, they realized that the miracle cure was wasn't going to work. So, but I'm sure, people, AI will figure it out. We'll ask the question to the great computer in the, wherever it lives, and it'll rustle up something.
Right. Well, it would just be living with and listening to the cloud, I think, at this point, right? So that's where we're headed anyway.
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of, thank goodness there's writing. A lot of these days we spent with email and text.
That's true too. Nobody actually talks anymore. If your phone rings, you get scared now. Now it's all texting and emailing anyway. So there's a silver lining there. Well, listen, man, it's great catching up with you. I thank you for the time, and everybody check out Paul Gilbert, the Dio album, available everywhere starting this Friday. Paul's take on great Dio material from Rainbow, Sabbath, and of course the Dio band as well, and it's phenomenal, man. I love the record, and I don't know if you knew Ronnie personally, but I did, and I think you would have loved what you did. Did you know Ronnie at all?
I met him once. It was at a Deep Purple concert in Japan. They were playing with the orchestra, and as a surprise guest, Ronnie came out and played "Love Is All." That kind of that song on, you can look it up on YouTube, and he's a cartoon frog playing this kind of beatly, like Penny Lane kind of a song. And I'd never heard the song. I was like, what's going on? Dio's here. He's playing this crazy pop song with an orchestra. And afterwards I went backstage, and he was the nicest, warmest person you could ever meet. It was really, of course, an honor to meet him, but just a pleasure that he was so cool.
Yeah, I think that was Butterfly Ball that was done. One of the Purple guys, I think it was John Lord, maybe put that together.
Roger Glover.
Roger Glover, right? Yeah. So I do recall that. Yeah. Well, listen, man. Again, all the best to you. I'm psyched for some Mr. Big stuff coming up, and also very much looking forward to everybody getting to hear the Dio album coming out on Friday, and hopefully get a chance to see you soon. Take care. Okay.
Eddie,
Thanks for the time.
Thank you so much. Great talking to you.
You too, man. All the best.
Have a great one. Bye-bye.
See ya. There he goes, everybody. Paul Gilbert checking in here on Trunk Nation. That was awesome. And again, check out the Dio record, which is out on Friday. You get to hear Paul doing instrumental takes on all of these great Dio, Rainbow, Sabbath classics. It's really, really cool. We're going to give you a little extra taste of it, again, going into the last break, wrapping up the show here in a couple minutes. Joel, which one are you going to do to close out?
Holy Diver.
Oh, that's great. So you're going to hear a little bit of Holy Diver action coming out tomorrow. So coming out to close out the show, the album again coming out on Friday. Great conversation with Paul. Great guy, world-class guitar player. And whether it's the instrumental stuff, his solo records, the RACER X stuff, or of course now Mr. Big coming back into action, as you heard him mention. And they are big in Japan, so it makes sense that they're starting there. And they're going to come together and play some final shows. Remember Pat Torpy, and play all of Lean Into It in its entirety. If you've never seen them live, and you heard Paul say it, that's a real band, Mr. Big. They all play and sing for real. No bullshit going on there. The drummer they're using, a big reason is the vocals, and that's a big consideration. So great when you hear stuff like that. That band's putting the pride and the care into doing it live and real, because obviously they could just take the easy way out and put a computer and be locked up and just the worst. So props and kudos to all these bands that are putting that effort in and doing it the right way, bringing a live show live. Amazing.